And Leanne says hi too.
Oh,
Silent,
hi, Leanne.
silently said hi. You have to
Yeah.
be silent, woman.
I think my wife told me that she read somewhere that people waving on Zoom meetings, it's like people back in the 1900s waving as like ocean liners or like
Yeah.
setting sail. We're all we're
My
just
my
so
favorite
excited.
my favorite Zoom thing is that when you have the business meeting and you're silent the whole thing, and then they go, "Okay, well that wraps it up," and everybody has to go, "Okay, guys," just to validate that they were there.
Yeah, yeah. Unmute. Thanks. Mute. Yeah, at a certain point, because with my job, which I am not allowed to speak about because I have an NDA, but yeah, no, with my job, like there's a lot of meetings where you just turn off the camera, turn off the mic, and just sit there while the lawyers kind of talk back and forth for a while.
Uh,
And then after
David,
about an
I
hour or
know
so,
I know you're representing Trump. You can just say it.
oh gosh, no, 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 but it's marketing work, so like
Oh, okay.
I can't talk about like the
Yeah.
various companies, but yeah, you sit there for a long time just listening, and you're the copywriter, so occasionally, maybe like once, like you kind of perk up when they start talking grammar because you're like, oh, maybe maybe they're gonna ask for my opinion about something, and you're like, oh no, no,
Do you
the
remember
lawyer.
back in the you just reminded me, do you remember back in the day, I used to always write you and say, "David, is this the right use of this?"
Dude, I still have people that do that, like people who are like, "Is this grammatically correct?" I'm like, "Well, it depends on which style guide you're using." And they're like,
I'm
Don't
I
tell me
wanna
that."
ask I wanna ask you one very important question that burns in my mind since the early '80s.
Okay.
Okay. Tears for Fears has a song called "The
Oh,
Hurting,"
okay.
and the very first line of it says, it's a question, it asks, "Is it an horrific dream?" Question mark.
Mm.
Is it an horrific dream? And to me, when I first heard it to this day, I've always thought that's wrong. It should be, is it a horrific dream?
I would think so because it's an hour because you're not pronouncing the H.
Right.
It
And
it's
horrific,
it and horrific starts with a consonant sound.
we're going
It's
to have to
huh.
write them.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with that's wrong because it has nothing to do with the letter. It has everything to do with the sound.
That
So
makes sense.
yeah,
It's
so it's
official.
yep, yep. Tears
Album
for Fears
recall.
is wrong.
Album recall right now.
So you may or may not know, but I discovered in 2020 this thing called Zoom, and like so many people, I've started figuring out that the only way I'm going to interact with people is by setting up these things. So I've done about 2 interviews now with Jamar Nicholas, who you know.
Yes.
I owe Scott Hines an interview.
Oh my God.
Um, and then there's a few others that I'm kind of working my way through. And then I'm posting it all on Patreon, which is that's what you do. So anyone who cares enough about us will be watching this. But I'll send you the link so that if you want to share it with your Patreon people, you can. If you want to just cherish it as part of like your Prince vault of private videos that no one sees, you can do that
This
too.
no,
But
this might be the great intro for me, my
yeah.
fans to your fans, or
Exactly. Well,
patrons, I should say.
they'll come together and they'll be like, "Yeah, I don't get it at
Yeah,
all."
like they're gonna just cancel everything. That's it.
But for people who don't, I'm talking as if like there's people out there watching. There's probably a handful, but for people who do watch, we know each other from like it has to have been about 14, 15 years ago with
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
through Fanboy Radio.
Mhm.
And we were both fans of Fanboy Radio, but the community was really kind of centered around the message board.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
and what was really interesting back then was like I feel like those interactions, and I don't feel like we were the only people to have this happen, but it's like those message boards, whether it was the Bendis board or Fanboy Radio or whatever it was, eventually people started figuring out, okay, we can meet up in San Diego. And if we
Mhm.
all pool our money together, we can hang out for a week.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you just become like genuine friends where you're like keeping up with everyone's families and stuff. But then what happened was is that that bastard who started Facebook, gosh, what's his name again? I'm getting old.
Zuckerberg.
Yeah, Zuckerberg came along, and I feel like he killed the message board.
Yeah, he did.
Like message boards just went away, and and I think Fanboy Radio and a lot of other groups, it was like, okay, well, do we go on Facebook now? And then it just didn't quite feel the same. So you're still following everyone, but it's not like you're like getting into these like massive discussions where you're like, oh, we're on a 10-page rant about who would win in a fight, Cyclops without his powers versus a grizzly bear. And those discussions I think were gone. So I don't know. Am I remembering this correctly?
I think that's exactly what happened. Plus, I mean, time happens,
Yeah,
and marriages and life, death, and the whole bit, happens. And
yeah,
but you know what though? I feel like there's a core group of us that
yep,
no matter what, I mean, 50 years could go by and we're still friends. Like I said,
oh yeah,
seeing you today, this
yeah.
is awesome. It feels like, like it was yesterday. Um, but yeah, I mean, life happens, and I think it's funny that you mentioned the message board, because I could remember that you get that little certain rush when you go on that blue message board they had, that
Yeah,
navy blue, and you go there and you see a new post, or a new, like somebody replied to you. And that was the way we were all keeping in touch. Yeah,
yeah,
Justin Stewart, Oliver Tull, all of them,
yeah.
Matt and Jeff, the whole
No, I
bit.
was gonna say there was more than a few occasions where I took a road trip up to St. Louis and just crashed on his couch,
Yeah,
on
yeah,
Jeff's couch.
or my couch even.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Scott Hines and Britta
yeah,
came. They stayed with us when TCU won the championship. That was
nice for
that was
Rose
good
Bowl.
timing. Yeah, that was really good timing. Yeah.
Very nice. So yeah, it's interesting how these communities start up, and yeah, it's kind of like that when you're younger. Like I'm talking like high school and junior high. If you're not in communication with them on like a daily, if not hourly basis, the friendship just dies
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, you're like, okay, now I'm like well into my 40s. I haven't seen this guy in like 5 years. Oh yeah, we're good.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
It's funny how
fine.
time is really the ultimate judge on like how important or
Yeah,
not important, like, keep in touch with someone is.
yeah.
I really do. Like, I feel like if I wrote you, I feel like could still write you and say, David, what's the proper usage of this? You would answer me.
I'd be like, oh yes, let's get into this. Well, and it's funny because like I just rewatched Revengeance, and like this is the problem with creators is I will consume your stuff and think that that's me hanging out with you. So I'm like, oh yeah, Jim and I we hang out all the time. Well, why? Oh, I watched his YouTube videos, and they're like, well, that's he didn't know you were hanging out with him.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I'm
we
gonna,
totally.
I'm gonna go get my Karma Incorporated issues right now. I'm gonna go
Yeah,
get them.
yeah. But I do think that there is some of that where it's like you're looking online and you're seeing what everyone's creating. And you're like, oh
Mhm.
man, he's doing some cool stuff. That person's doing cool stuff. And you're forgetting that like they don't know that. Like
Yeah.
they're not like like
We were back then, to sound like an old man. That was before, really, like, texting was still kind of like, I didn't have texting on my phone back then.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was pre-texting, really. I mean, some people had it, but that was like, oh, that costs money every time you get a text. So the
Yep.
message boards were great. Message boards and email. That's
Yeah.
when you tell somebody, hey, email me. And
Yeah.
then, and then
Now if you
and
told
there's so
someone to
many
email,
projects. There's a lot of projects that got started because of that message board too. You
oh
know.
yeah. Well, I will still say that one of my favorite comic book projects was The Henchman.
Yes, yes. To
It
this
was,
day, I agree. Yes.
and what's funny is I don't know who wrote it. I don't know who did, like it was just this sort of like it was a conversation
It
of
was.
do
I
this
remember
and this.
you wrote it. You
I,
wrote
I
it.
like I did.
But yes, but it was an idea that I said, David, let's do like, I have this idea for this, and then you ran with it.
Yeah.
'Cause- Yeah,
But some of those jokes, I'm like, that does not feel like my joke. Like
yeah,
that,
yeah. That's true.
and that I guess
Like,
that's part of like the whole collaborative process is you look at something and you're like, did was that me? I don't know. Like it was just
yeah,
kind of a thing that emerged and it happened.
We did
So
a jam comic too called The Bullet Angelica. Do you remember that?
I remember that. Yes.
Yeah, that
Uh,
had probably 20 people involved in it one time, and it was a panel at a time. And it got started, and then the next person would take that panel, and where's the story going to go from there? And
yeah.
then, and it seemed like everybody was introducing a new character every, five. But it got a little bit of momentum going because at one point Scott and I don't know if Ann Britta, but they dressed up as Bullet Angelica characters for Halloween. And I was just like, that's bizarre. Even back then, I'm like, nobody's going to know what this is in 12 minutes. You know, they're going to just think you're insane. But a
And it
lot,
was funny because you'd get like different people's sensibilities. So sometimes Bullet Angelica got serious like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
the mythology was developing, and then other times you were like, it's like just a few steps away from a fart joke.
yeah, exactly. And you also got to see what a pizza tastes like when 40 people are putting ingredients in it.
Yeah.
So it was one of the things that we never talk about. I'm surprised that we don't mention this more. Um, is that on the message boards and in the fanboy radio community, and this is 2003, 4, 5. Robert Kirkman was part of that too. I
Yeah.
mean, he was on the message boards. That's insane. Like, and the guy, he's the creator of The Walking Dead. That,
Yeah.
and back then it wasn't The Walking Dead. Back then it was, I think, Invincible was his new thing.
Hmm.
That's his new the thing he was really proud of,
Yeah.
Invincible.
Well, and even like Scott Kurtz, who's, kind of a big guy, like in the whole D&D, and he's doing some really crazy stuff with Acquisitions Incorporated. But yeah, and then Robert Kirkman. I think Robert Kirkman's probably the big star to come out of all that, because
Oh yeah, yeah.
how do you get any bigger than that? And it's funny, like I had brunch with the guy once, and
Yeah, well, we were on a panel with him, weren't we?
yeah,
At Comic Con, San Diego Comic Con. You and I were on a panel with Robert Kirkman and Scott Kurtz, which
yeah.
was that was surreal too.
It was funny because like I know you've seen Almost Famous.
Yes.
And you talk about there's the scene with Penny Lane where she says, "Whenever I get lonely, I just go to a record store to see some of my old friends." And I feel like that sometimes with like the comic book shop, where you'll be
Yeah,
like, you'll go and I'll be like, and Kennedy, who's now 16, I will go with her, and she probably gets tired of it now because I'm like, oh yeah, I know that person. We hung out once. This person over there, and
yeah.
she's like, well, what happened to you? No, she doesn't say that, but I'm
Okay, I
like,
remember the first Comic Con I ever went to. We went to the Hyatt bar afterwards, and Frank Miller was there, and also Brian Posehn. What's his name? Brian
yeah, Brian Posehn.
Hussein was
Yeah,
there, and I remember like that was incredible. Like Frank Miller's standing right here. I could assassinate him if I was crazy. Like that was so weird. That was the first thought I had. I was like, this is so weird. Like he's hanging out. Like it wasn't like Hollywood. The
yeah,
whole comic scene was there. People were accessible.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, almost weirdly so, where you were like, "Oh, there's Quentin Tarantino just walked by," and
yeah,
you're just like, "Okay."
yeah. I've
And
realized that the comic book scene, comic book celebrities it's sort of akin to, and I'm not into wrestling, but it's sort of akin to wrestling
mhm,
because they're really close with their fans too. Except the
yeah,
only difference is the comic book creators can't kill you physically.
yeah, no, no. There's probably like a small handful that like discovered the gem and went really crazy with it, but
Yeah,
no,
for
for
the
the
most
most
part,
part,
they'll grab a burger with you or something.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That was always really the interesting thing, and it's funny because like when you see in the different directions people are going with stuff, I feel like, and I was talking with Jamar Nicholas about this, is that comic book mentality, that sort of indie mentality. You
hmm
don't see that necessarily in other art forms where you're just like, oh yeah, I'm just going to do it by myself. And they're like, but the gatekeepers. And you're like,
yeah,
oh, but
yeah,
I'll just do my own thing. It's fine.
yeah.
But you're like, but aren't you supposed to ask someone's permission to do that first? And you're like, oh. Like
I,
I'm even thinking about like, hold on. I was just informed that my battery is low, so I need to figure this one out. I'm going to go in the dark for a second here. See, look, this is my
spiritually though.
great, great production value here. Um,
Warts and All Productions presents the David Hopkins.
all right, here we go.
There we go.
Now I'm glowing because I've got the nice backlighting here.
I have you go. You're going freestyle in my house. I don't even have headphones on. I just have the.
Oh wow, you're just going for it, man. But like, and I'm thinking about, and for people who don't know you, they should go to Jim Lujan, Lujan with a J, of course, as God intended, jimlujan.com, which will then lead people to your YouTube page. And
Yes.
you are an indie like an indie cartoonist. You do indie cartoon films. I like how I'm saying that as if this concept does not exist. You do independent cartoon films.
Indie. Does that stand for Indiana?
Yes, they do, and they're only from Indiana. No,
They're
but
all.
you do cartoon shorts, and you've actually done some feature length stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but like to me, you are like the epitome of that. In that, like usually when I see a cartoon, there's like 1,000 people in the credits,
Oh, I know.
and the people that you roll with are like, I did it with 4 people,
Yeah. Yeah.
barely.
Well, that's funny because I'll meet other creators and they'll be like, yeah, we have a small team. We have 6 people on the animation team, and I'm like, that's like my cast. That's me plus my cast.
Yeah.
Everybody. Um, and I just figured out a method to do lowbrow, to do minimal animation, but it works. Whatever it is, it works for what it is. And I had a really good talk with, he's a good friend of mine. His name's Chris Pronowski. He's the head of Titmouse.
Hmm.
And they do some great
Yeah.
stuff and worked on some real animation. And Chris, we a long time ago we had this talk. He said, "Don't ever make your stuff try to get it too polished because there's this weird middle ground. You either want it to be really handmade DIY like yours is, or you want it to be super professional. When you get in the middle is when stuff starts looking weird."
It's like the uncanny valley of animation. It's that in between state where people are like, "Oh, I don't
It's
know if
kind
this."
of like the Polar Express of animation.
Yes.
I hate to that's terrible, but I because Polar Express is actually not a bad movie, but the
But the
character,
animation
the
kind of throws people off a
animation,
bit.
a little bit creepy because it's almost super real,
Hmm.
but yet it's not quite there.
Yeah.
Um, I'm lately in the last 5 or 6 years, there was a movie called, and you might really enjoy this if you haven't seen it. It's a movie from China called Have a Nice Day,
Okay.
and it's by a creator, and I remember his name because it's like a play on words on my name. His name is Liu John.
Oh, you guys have to work together.
Yeah, isn't that weird? It's like, yeah, or is it John Liu? I screwed it up, but the movie's called Have a Nice Day. But it's not quite anime. It's a Chinese. It's sort of anime, but what I really liked about it was it's kind of like an animated Chinese Pulp Fiction,
Mhm.
but the shots are very, very like just they're stagnant. It's every shot is if you could look at it if it was a printout, you would look at it for 5 minutes going, this is beautiful, this is greatly done. But the shots, the camera doesn't move that much, and the people aren't. The people might be at a coffee shop, and then when they talk, they might have a cigarette. That might be one movement, and then they might go. But it works. It totally works, and the details in it make it work. And when I watched this film, I thought, this is like what I want to do. This is what I'm doing and what I'm aiming for. Like, is this? It's to create a vehicle that can tell a story that works and is satisfying, but at the same time, it's like you're not competing with Disney or Pixar. You're doing your own thing, and just like me, that his film makes no money either. So yeah,
It's all similar. Yeah. Well,
he actually, I believe he's in the same distribution company that Revengeance is with.
okay.
The good thing about Revengeance, I talked to Bill, Bill, first name basis.
Yeah,
Um,
well, why not? You guys did a project
we
together.
actually are. We're actually, I swear to God, we're very good friends. Like we
I
would.
would be a little worried if you were like, I talked with Mr. Plimpton the other day, and I'm like, oh my
I hope
gosh, he must be
I'm
psychotic.
saying his name. I won't say it 3 times because he'll appear. No, but I was talking with him the other day, and we were talking about Have a Nice Day,
Mhm.
And he's the one that told me, yeah, they were having trouble making money on that in the theaters because this came out like 3 or 4 years ago. And I was telling him how much I love that film and how great it. And he saw it and he's like, yeah, I see what you mean. And he goes, yeah, but it's not doing well in the U.S. And I'm like, figures. Um, but Revengeance was such a low, like we kept the budget really low and everything, and we kept it really contained. That he said it's been good for him. Like it's been, I won't say it's like, oh, it's a moneymaker, but it's like it's not a, it didn't tank. So
Yeah.
thankfully, yeah. So
Well, and this, I think, must have been an interesting experience for you. Like you started off doing shorts. I mean, we're talking like 5 minute, 12 minute. And
yeah,
I'm sure a lot of that had to just do with the technology, the bandwidth, and just even YouTube back in those days, people weren't thinking like, I'm going to release something that's an hour and 30 minutes on
right,
YouTube.
yeah,
That's just not something you did. Was
yeah.
it a weird experience sitting in a theater with people watching a long form story that you did and seeing like, oh no, people are totally digging this. Like this works.
Yeah, to a point it was because that was always like even creating my early stuff, that was my phobia. Like I thought, oh, I don't want to bore an audience. You want to watch one of your creations with an audience and have them like, shit, that's a nightmare. But
So what was it like then sitting in the theater with everyone?
well, by the time Revengeance came around, it was like um, it was like knowing a dance routine really well,
Mhm.
exactly every step and everything. But now you're on Dancing with the Stars and you're going to do it for the first time. And you're like, everything's going to go well unless I trip and fall. And the first time watching it with a paying audience that wasn't family and friends and stuff in a theater in Portland at the premiere, I remember thinking, this is like real. Like these are not paid. This is part of a festival. It's not even a Bill Plympton event. It's
Yeah.
part of a festival. So and it was a packed house. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, when I tell this story to David Hopkins in 5 years, I need to be able to look back and go, you know what? I was pretty cool that night. I didn't panic. I didn't panic. I just sat there and I thought, it's going to be what it is. Like I feel like they're going to like it, but if they don't, I at least have to feel good about the film and have it. And luckily, it was a really great response. Um, I left that theater very charged up, like, oh man, like I can play this. Because looking back now, Revengeance, there's things, and still to this day, if I watch it, there's things I adore about it, things I love about it, but there's also things I'm like, like we didn't go like there's this certain scene that like I would have played it a little bit different, but since it's a collaboration,
Mhm.
Bill went this way, and I asked myself, is it me being paranoid, or would it have worked the other way? And like you start asking yourself these questions on certain scenes, but ultimately, what really is a big kick in the butt is that a lot of times those scenes that I'm questioning about are the ones that audience ends up liking. So I'm like, okay, I was a bad call on my side. On my side, it's like, so yeah. So watching it with an audience it was really exhilarating. It really was. It was nerve wracking, exhilarating, and it was just it felt really good. Like that
Yeah.
Portland trip was fantastic.
Well, here, let me see if I can predict something. The first big laugh in that movie has to be when the naked guy crashes out of the motel door. Is that what you're waiting for, that moment, to see
Yeah,
how people react?
that was one of them. Actually, I think. Well,
Like once you get that big laugh, you got to be like, oh, okay.
since we're behind the Patreon wall.
Yes.
All right, I'll give you. I've never shared this with anyone. A specific example of where I'm saying I was going like, oh man, I would have done this different. That Bill chose is the opening shot.
Mhm.
The opening shot is it's a still. The camera doesn't move and it stays still for a long time, and you see it's a motel,
Mhm.
and you see this cart being pushed,
The
along,
hands.
towards the
Yeah.
camera. My design for that was way, way more detailed because my thinking was, oh, this is going to be the opening shot. And my storyboard I had for it, or the design I had it looked different.
Yeah.
So when I saw Bill's, I was like, oh, this is a really this is not a fleshed out version. This is like a really, he rendered, and I thought, is this the finished version? So it took me a long time to get used to that. See, the audience doesn't know. The audience sees it for the first time, and it kind of sets a tone for the rest of the film. But in my mind, I was like, oh, this has to be our Stanley Kubrick shot. This has to be our, and and looking back too, also, I just the other day I looked at the original artwork and the storyboards. Um, my original shot's not that great, anyways. It's just different. It's
Yeah.
just different. So there was a lot of that, and that's coming from somebody that's always had full control of their own films,
Mhm.
full control, too much control. So that when you collaborate, even when it's Bill Plympton. Oh, the other thing too, this will actually set the tone. By the way, it's my cat on the cat scratcher.
Okay, good.
Um, when I started working with Bill on this, um, I thought it was going to look like his other films.
And
Like
it looks like your stuff.
it looks like my style, which is
Yeah.
like part of me is like, oh, that's great, ego boost. But the other part of me, I'm a realist. I know that Bill's hardcore fans are going to go, this is not. It's like It's like saying, it's like when you. Oh, I got Paul McCartney playing on my album, really? And you listen to the album, and it's like Norwegian death metal. It's like,
Yeah.
the audience is like going to be like, oh, I came here for Bill Plympton, and I got
Yeah.
Bill Lujan. So, but I'm ecstatic about what he did with the designs. Like
Yeah.
I was blown away, like what he did with them.
And then you're like, thank you very much. I never want to collaborate with anyone ever again.
No, it's
It's too much.
the opposite. Well, we did the opposite on. He's working on a film now called Slide,
Uh-huh.
and the opposite happened. That one, I'm helping him with some stuff, like
That's,
on that, like a little like the story's his.
yeah.
Story is totally Bill's, but I gave him a couple of like little, um, like one of the things I told him was that he's going to have twin mayors of a city. They're these two brothers are the mayor.
Yeah.
Um, no, that's wrong. I think that was his. I named everybody. That was good.
Yeah.
I named everybody. I did some other story help with them, like I gave him pointers, but it's his film, and it looks like a Bill Plympton film.
Well, I do have to say this about your work as I turn the light back on. Um, like your style, it's almost like you emerged from the head of Zeus, like Athena. You were already like fully formed with your armor ready to go. Cause like, I mean, I think even back to like Chicken and Cigarettes and like all the stuff that you've done, like your style, like you kind of knew what a Jim Lujan story was like. You knew what it was, you knew what it wasn't.
Yeah.
So much so, this is where I get to my point. I was watching Tiger King back in March along with the rest of America, and I was like, holy shit, did Jim Lujan write this?
I was so happy when that came out. I was like, oh my god, the world see like you're all on my page now.
It's like proof of concept there, because I was
Yeah,
like, Joe
yeah.
Exotic looks like he was drawn by Jim Lujan. Like,
I should get royalties for that actually.
he
Um,
looks like you created him. I was like, all the beats, all the jokes, they're
yes,
gems.
I know. It's like right up my alley. I was like, and when I watched it, I loved it. By the way, I was
Of
like, this is
course.
the greatest thing ever. No, yeah, like heroes of mine have always, for one, they've always been from other mediums, like
Yeah.
books or movies, not animation necessarily, except for Bill and Ralph Bakshi, and obviously Mike Judge. Those
Mhm.
three are the big three for me, animation wise. But like Elmore Leonard is like a huge hero of mine.
Nice.
And what I love about it is that he's so prolific.
Mhm.
And then you can go and you can see, oh, this is it's almost like he writes stuff as throwaway and then puts it out, but he doesn't. But
Yeah.
and I just thought that was so great because if you like one Elmore Leonard book, you're probably going to like this one, even though they're not identical, because
Yeah.
they're just dripping with Elmore Leonard style.
His isms. Yeah.
Yes, and it's kind of like I feel like I have a similar style. Like it's a Jim Lujan cartoon, but this one's about a psychic, or there's a Jim Lujan cartoon about a boxer, or it's Jim Lujan cartoon about uh, whatever it is. Um, and I kind of like, yeah, you're right. But you know what though? It's kind of like an unintentional thing. It's just the way I do
Yeah.
my work. Yeah.
Well, and I don't want to get you in trouble with your neighbors, but I imagine living in West Covina has been a big influence.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was thinking about that. It's funny that you say that. I was thinking about that the other day. West Covina, okay, California
Yeah.
is, I've always said, is it's kind of like Disneyland. You have the different lands
Yeah.
chopped up. You got, you know, biker meth land, you got surfer land, you got the hood,
Yeah.
one of the best hoods ever, too, by the way.
Yeah.
You got, Brady Bunch over, it just keeps going. But West Covina, within Los Angeles, greater Los Angeles, you have West Covina. West Covina is like that.
Yeah.
You have this area of West Covina, you have the Cholos over here, you got the Brady Bunch families over here. So I grew up seeing a really diverse mix of people. And I grew up seeing a diverse mix of what the rest of the world is seeing now. I kind of grew up seeing an Asian cop,
Mhm.
seeing an African American school teacher, seeing there was like, I'm very very, there was never enough of one ethnicity to dominate, you
Yeah.
know. And West Covina didn't start out like that. West Covina was very very like a white
Mhm.
neighborhood in the 60s, and when my parents moved here, and then when I was born, it just like, kind of like everybody came in. And growing up in my school, I remember it was very mixed, and we had a very mixed group of friends, which also leads to this byproduct, which is people of our age.
Mhm.
We have a very politically incorrect sense of humor. Not to the point. I mean, you gotta take ownership at some point for it. I don't go around saying the things I said when I was in high school, because they would be considered hate crimes, most of them, because we
Yeah.
were horrible with each other, but it was all in jest. Like my best friend um, could make a joke about, my Mexican heritage, and I could make a joke about his heritage,
Yeah.
and it wasn't like, wow, that's me. It was like expected. But it's funny because I was just talking about this too the other day. It's like now what happens is you get people in our age range, and some of us, some of them, hold on to it too dear. Like, well, why can't I use that word? Well, you can't use that word. Well, why can't I? He just used it. Yes, but he is of that culture. You can,
Yeah.
and it's ridiculous. It's just, you have to let things go. And this brings us back to Revengeance. When we started writing Revengeance, the idea of it was to make this grindhouse pulp 70s exploitation type feel, and
Yeah.
everybody in it would be exaggerated, and like everybody in it would be just ridiculous, and it would be our idea was the audience would sit down and go, oh, that's funny because that's ridiculous, that's exaggerated, oh, look at this guy's exaggerated. And
It
then
it
when
it felt kind of like a oh gosh, I'm going to forget the name. Richard Pryor, and who is his sidekick?
Gene Wilder,
Gene Wilder. It felt like a Richard Pryor, Gene Wilder kind of romp, where
yes.
if you rewatch those, they're so offensive.
Really, yeah. But funny is funny too.
Oh, absolutely. So
So
funny.
there's this weird. Um, I'm not a big fan of extremism on either side, even if it's
Yeah.
my side.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes inappropriate is part of the humor. It's
Mhm.
just that you don't want the inappropriate to become the norm.
Yeah.
And for years it was the norm. It was for years it was, haha, I can say this and you can't do anything about it. And then the people that were the recipients of that were like, that's not cool. And now it's flipped, and the people that had the power before, meaning us,
Yeah.
we're like, wow, you're sensitive. And it's like, well, how does it feel to not to, when the tables have turned? It's like all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, why does every movie have to have a mixed cast in it? Oh, how does it feel? You don't like that? Well, how do you think it felt for 60 years, when it was the other way around, you know?
Yeah. When was it Magnificent Seven? The Mexican warlord was played by a Jewish man with really
In-
dark makeup.
And sometimes this is horrible, but okay, I'm also not big on going to the past and scorning people for, because sometimes if you can have Marlon Brando playing Emilio Zapata, it's interesting, maybe it works, or have him play. Well, I don't even know if Brando's Italian. Is he Italian?
I'd have to think so. I mean,
I
his
would
name is
have-
Marlon Brando. They claim him at this point, if he's not.
yeah. But what if he's like Polish or something and he's playing an Italian guy?
They recruited him. They've probably got a city named Marlon Brando at this point.
Probably Brandolini.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but like I'm not big on going back and Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder walking through the jail and stir crazy, So it's still funny, but I know it now. I just saw Pulp Fiction a year ago, and there's a city here called Pomona, and there's
Yeah.
this theater called the Fox Theater, and it was like all retro. And we went and saw. It was actually more than a year ago. It's probably 2 years, pre-COVID,
Yeah.
and we saw a screen of Pulp Fiction, and in that screening was attended by mostly probably millennials, probably 80%, and then there
Yeah.
were some older fogies like me that went and saw. And I sat there and I love Pulp Fiction. It's probably my favorite movie, and I watched it with them. And then there was a few scenes, and as I'm watching, I'm realizing, oh, this is coming up,
Yeah.
and the young crowd, how's it? And you could just tell they were just like, oh, not cool, and I was just, yeah, it's the hardest struggle right now. It's things that have already been done. Do you go back and gosh, I mean, like a great example is Gone with the Wind,
Yeah.
considered American classic, which I've never seen, by the way.
You only need to watch it once, in my opinion. I watched it once and I was like, okay, that was really long.
You know what it is? You know what it is too, David? I'm big on this. I'm big on, there's a line. Everyone has their different lines. Like you
Yeah.
draw a line, and you could say, "Well, does Gone with the Wind go over the line?" And let's say you go, "You know what? No, it doesn't." But does um, uh, Birth of
Birth
a
of a
Nation
Nation.
go over the line? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the line. It doesn't even see the line. It's so funny. So, like, I believe that. I believe everyone has a line. So it's like, well, why? Kind of like the what I mentioned earlier. Well, why can they say it and we can't say it? Because here's the line, stupid.
Yeah.
you know. And I'm a victim of that too. I'm a
Yeah.
victim. I'm a
Yeah.
victim.
Of course.
I'm part of that too.
Yeah. No, I find that particularly having daughters, Kennedy is very quick to let me know whenever I say something that is not quite as woke as it should be. And
Oh
I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah.
part of me is like, I want to get mad, like, well, why, you know,
If
that's
if
what we,
if there's any human being correcting David Hopkins, then you know that okay, things have really because I mean you were the corrector before
oh
you.
gosh,
Oh
probably
yes,
so. Yeah.
that's kind of not cool,
I was
and
the
then,
moral authority.
yes, absolutely. So if they're correct,
And I
but
passed it on to my offspring there, where she's now
but
like, Dad, you can't call him fat. I'm like, but he is fat. No, we don't say that. That's body shaming. But
right,
he
right, right.
he's Dad, don't do that. Oh, but
I
it's
know.
he knows. No, yeah, I know he knows, Dad. Don't say that. Okay, all right,
Every
all
time
right.
if I find myself getting frustrated with the younger generation doing that, I immediately stop and say, well, it's this. Here's the reality. It's like this. Would you rather have it the other way? Where they would have went the other way and like, no, no, I'd take this a
This
thousand
is
times.
better.
Yeah.
This is
Yes.
better. And honestly, I find myself, I learn. Like I'm like, yeah, it's probably a good point. And I'm trying to figure it out. I mean, even I mean, we're still figuring things out, and I do agree with you. And I think it's harder for you than it is for me because you're doing comedy.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I'm not
totally.
I'm not trying to be funny. So like it's pretty I don't want to say it's easy for me, but I mean, there are things that as I'm writing, I've got to be aware of, but doing comedy, I mean, yeah, I
Well,
mean that for you
I'll
is going to be
share
really hard.
another exclusive with you. I don't really talk about this that much, but I'll tell you. Um,
And the thousands of people watching on my
yeah,
Patreon.
the when we showed Revengeance, we showed some clips of it when it was in production at the I want to say it's a University of Iowa,
Mhm.
but I believe it was the University of Iowa. Um, and afterwards, a young lady came up to me and I was, you mind if I ask you a quick question? And I'm so used to like family and friends going, how did you do this? Or like a
Yeah.
positive. And she says, well, when you were explaining this clip, because there's a scene, okay, here's another thing that when it's out of your control. I wrote a scene that takes place, it was supposed to be like a trucker bar where all
Yeah.
in that
Is it
desert.
the Cha Cha bar or
Yes,
the
Cha Cha Boom. My sister
Cha Cha
worked
bar?
at a place called the Boom Boom Room in Orange County,
Yeah.
and it was a drag bar.
Mhm.
And I wanted to create that, but in the desert. And my idea was it's a place where all these, like a lot of rednecks would go. And
Yeah.
I mean rednecks, I don't mean that derogatory. I mean literally, like a lot of
Yeah.
redneck guys would go there and they would secretly like let loose and they would dress. But that's a hard thing to translate. Like when Bill did it, it was like I think it lost something in translation. So when I was explaining this scene that we were
It was
going to
like a
show,
Euro truck stop gay drag
yeah, it was
bar.
totally
I
like
want to hang out there, honestly. I'm
yeah. Well, the girl that helped with the animation, Alenka, she
Yeah.
got it. Like she
Yeah.
was, I guess you could say she was a millennial, but she
Yeah.
got it. She's like, okay, I get it. So she some of the characters, the way she drew them and helped draw them, and like took some of Bill's drawings and like accentuated. Like so there's an element there where it kind of works, but it wasn't the vision I had. Anyways, when I was explaining this to the audience, I used the word transvestite. I
Yeah.
said it's kind of a. My sister worked at a transvestite bar. I said, and I just kept going on, and she came, and she corrected me afterwards. She said that's kind of a hurtful term, and that was the first time I'd ever heard that in my life. I'm like, what? Part of me was like, what? I've said this word my whole life. You can't take this away from me. I was so like what in my mind? I didn't react like that, but I just thought that. And
Yeah.
then I stopped and thought, you know what? This is how, like, just stop, examine it. This is how change happens.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there's been people with like, well, why can't I call all Hispanics Mexican?
Yeah.
It's like, because he's from Cuba,
Yeah.
well, what's the difference? You know, I didn't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
So I did. I stopped and when I told Bill about it, he's like, what? Because Bill's, of a different, I was like, that's silly. But that was my first inkling of, uh-oh, Bill, I see storm clouds. They're coming, brother. They're coming. It changed my thinking that night. It
Yeah.
changed my thinking. I thought, if she's thinking that, and you multiply that, 1,000 people, I don't think she was being um, unreasonable. I thought this is just a perspective I had never heard or even thought of, and I
Yeah.
never used that word as a hurtful word. But if it's taken as a hurtful word, where's the line? I need to move the line back a little bit.
Yeah.
So, but I change. Like I don't use that word if it's considered a hurtful word. I don't. It's not that important to me. I don't use
Yeah.
it. But I move my line a little bit.
Yeah.
But my line's still over here. It still needs probably to go back a little bit farther. But
Yeah.
but um but yeah, that was the first time I realized. It's when you realize something that you do every day it is your norm, can be considered like all of a sudden it's like wow, I thought I was safe. Like I
Yeah.
thought I was one of the good guys and I'm not safe. That's kind of what's happening across the country.
Yeah.
That's why I'm going to storm the Capitol again next week. So if you guys want to join me, I'm just kidding.
We
Whoop,
got to
whoop.
jump on Parlor first, right? Oh
Yeah.
no, it's no longer around. Darn it. No. Well, like even like I mean, just as a white middle class straight male cis like for me, like I can't just like have a letter from my like best friend Kara and be like, Kara's a lesbian and she wrote this permission slip that says it's okay for me to do this.
You go like this.
I
You go like
asked,
this. You go. Hold on.
hold on,
You
I've got my card.
unfold it and you're here. Yeah.
By royal proclamation, she speaks on behalf of all marginalized groups to say that whatever David says is fine because he's a nice guy. It's a good heart. He doesn't mean anything bad by it.
We
It's
all
perfectly okay.
we all think we're the good guy. All of
Yeah.
us. We're like, well, we're the good guy. They're talking about other people, and and I think you and I have a good tolerance for change, like, well, self-examination.
Mhm.
Like we can stop and go, hey, check ourselves. Yeah,
Yeah.
are we cool or are we not being cool? Right? But I think even that, when we have that mentality,
Yeah.
that's like a built-in like autoimmune or the defense that we have that tells us like, well, our decision's right.
Yeah. It's it's okay. I
Yeah.
can, yeah, and it is funny. Like you realize that you don't get that when you're creating things. You don't get the permission slip at the front right after the title page or in the opening credits where it's like the following has been approved by the various groups. And so you really do have to kind of say, okay, when I write this, if it is so offensive in a way that it takes people out of the story, and now all of a sudden, like you can't tell me that Huckleberry Finn, it would be a better story nowadays if the N word wasn't in it. Like, yes, we know that Mark Twain was like, he wasn't meaning it the way that we think it's meant.
Right, right, right,
But at
right.
the same time, it is so distracting now
Yes, yes.
that the
It-
story would be more enjoyed if you took it out. And it
It's
wouldn't it wouldn't take much away from it.
like the genitalia of the blue man in Watchmen. It's I understand why you're putting it there, but it's distracting.
Oh, I totally support the blue genitalia in Watchmen. I'll stand by that one.
I know I see that Dr. Manhattan pinup book in the back right there.
Take that genitalia from my cold dead hand. Oh wait, let's see. Gosh, that didn't come out right.
I think we're both going to get a lot of new patrons from this.
I think so. They're like, oh, your stories are not like you at all. I'm a little disappointed. And Jim's are not. But I mean, well, let me ask you this. We're getting close on an hour here, and so if people are still hanging with us, that's good. But um, so like what, and I'm going to start with the beginning of the interview at the end of the interview. So I'm going to really shake things up. But
Like it.
I've never asked you this question, but what got you into animation? Like
Fun.
that's not a thing that people just roll out of bed and go, I can do that.
So, back in the late mid 90s.
Okay.
Um, so there was a period where, as a kid, I really wanted to be a comic book artist, or actually a Mad Magazine artist. And I was into comics. I fell out of comics at the age of like 15 or 16.
Yeah.
And I know this because it's right when John Byrne took over the Hulk. Because 5 years earlier, I was praying to Jesus, please, Jesus, put John Byrne on the Hulk. And then when it
Let him
happened,
save it. Yeah.
yeah, and Jesus said yes. And but when it happened, I remember it was weird. I remember getting the issue, and I'm like, I don't have a love in my heart. Like this doesn't excite me. It's so weird. Like I've fallen kind of out of love. I don't know what it was. It was just I just grew out of them, and then I didn't touch comics for another like 5 or 6 years, and then Fanboy Radio came around and made me get interested in that world again. At the same time as that was happening, um, maybe a couple of years earlier, a year earlier, I started feeling like I wanted to make films. I wanted to get into live action, and kind of the two combined. I thought, well, I love drawing though. I love all of this, and I love doing music. I really love doing music, so I could combine all three of these things. And then I saw years later, I saw Spike and Mike Sick and Twisted,
Hmm.
and I saw Mike Judge's cartoons in there.
Yeah.
Um, the very first Beavis and Butthead, I think it was Frog Baseball, Inbred Jed's homemade cartoons. It was a couple, and I looked at it and I was like, for one, this guy draws exactly like me. I mean, like very similar to the way I draw. This is great. I love this, and he's actually making moving. So I started looking into it, and I didn't know how to animate, so I did animatic cartoons, and immediately, I mean, a month after I started doing them, I went to my public access in Boyle Heights, and I gave them a videotape, and they played it on the air. And so I had a TV show like a month after I started making these like animatic cartoons. And then and then over time it became I started adding a little bit of animation. That's kind of how I got into animation. So originally it was I want to do live action, I want to do music, I want to do it was just a combination of all the things I loved, and that's how I got in. And at first, I did everything. I did all the voices, all the music. It was just me,
Yeah.
100%. And then over time, the second phase, third phase of my career, I started bringing other people in, and now that's the thing I look forward to is working with other people, having other people do voices and things along with me. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because, yeah, my trajectory went like the opposite direction, where the longer I've gone, the more I don't want to work with other people. Like,
But you're an author. That's the way it's supposed to be. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I am now, but I mean, early on when I was working in comics, I was walking the streets at night looking for an artist to draw my scripts and stuff. And will
David,
you?
let me
Will
ask
you?
you. I've never asked you this.
Yeah.
You've done comics, graphic novels, and you've done prose.
Yeah.
Just do you have a preference, or is it what mood you're in? To let's say you had okay, let's just say you had this great idea, but it's not fleshed out,
Mhm.
and it was an idea that falls right in the middle. Like, oh, this could go graphic novel, or this could go. Do you have from your working method and the satisfaction you get from creating? Which do you have a preference for the two?
It changed. I mean, and you won't be surprised to hear this, but there was probably a time when I would have been like comics. I will live and die with comics, comics, comics. But I've actually found that as a creator, writing my own stuff, prose, is far more satisfying. But I think the other thing that happened is I didn't think anyone would want to read it. And so it was one of those things where it took me a long time to get to the point to where I was comfortable not hiding. And in some ways, I mean, all comic book writers are hiding behind the talents of the artist
Mhm.
because they can take it and they can expand it to do things. And it's really cool to like hand a script in and then start seeing those rough pencils coming back. And you're like, okay, this is really cool. But it's also the world's slowest typewriter. I mean, I worked on Astronaut Dad and it didn't come out till 8 years after I had written it, like
Wow.
the finished thing. And, so but at the same time, like what I'm doing right now is tremendously satisfying. Where my goal is this year is to release 4 novellas this year. Like I'll have one coming out in March, and then 3 months after that, 3 months after that, and then fourth one in December. And because of the technology now, I can upload it to Amazon, and it's
Yeah.
there, and people can buy it, and then I move on to the next one. And I realized that if I worked in traditional publishing, I would put something out and then it would come out like a year after that, after
Oh
like
yeah.
several copy editors and proofreaders and line
See?
editors and
Yeah.
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 But I nowadays I would absolutely say it's just writing, just sitting down and writing it out and it's become really satisfying for me. But I
There's
will say
definitely
this,
there's a
the what?
gravitas with it too. Definitely.
Oh yeah, yeah. I get to earn my corduroy jacket. They're like, here you go, here's your corduroy jacket. You can now smoke a pipe unironically. Um, but part of it also though was I will say this, the comic book community though is a lot more dear to me
Oh yeah.
because in the world of book publishing, there definitely is this sort of negative stereotype towards people who work in vanity press, which, that's, I mean, the indie people are just relentlessly shit upon in the world of book publishing. But in the world of comics, like indie people like can hold their head high. They are
Yeah.
they are respected and proud members of the community. And that's one thing that I kind of carried with me over into doing the book publishing is I was like, this is great. Like I'm just doing my own thing and I love it. And that's the comic book community that I actually one of the
Yeah.
last comic books I did, I wrote out the whole script. It never got published, was a thing called How to Lose Big, and it was a story about a person who realized he didn't like making comics as much as he just liked hanging out with the people who made comics.
Yeah. Jada, I'm gonna suggest something. I know more other people have suggested this to you, but have you thought about just doing a straight up podcast about writing and your stories or your experiences? You
A
have a
little
great
bit.
you have a great voice for podcasts, and you're
Do I,
an guy. So
do I have a face for podcasting too?
that was my thing. I was going to say that, but it just no. I've told you this before.
Yeah.
Whenever you would be interviewed on Fanboy Radio or any outlet, I'd throw your interview on. You're like the greatest voice to draw. You know.
I have thought about it, but it is one of those things where part of the reason why I like doing this is because I don't edit shit. Like
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
jump on and just start rambling. And
I would listen to that. If you did that, I would listen to that. Yeah.
yeah,
Just think about it. And
yeah,
I know the world doesn't need another podcast, but the world might need your podcast. So you never.
that's true. Well, and for me, it also comes down to, like, I realize my youngest daughter, who you've never met, but you need to because she's hilarious. Greta once told me straight up, she was like, "Dad, there are already books at the library. You don't have to write a book." I was like,
I like Greta. That's
like like there was this existential dread of, like, oh my God, she is absolutely right. And that's true. I mean, it's true for what you do, it's true for what I do. Like, there's already stuff out there. So why are we doing it? And I really had to go, okay, why am I doing any of this?
yeah,
And what you realize is part of it is the podcast, the videos, is you begin to create kind of a relationship with people, and so you're now connecting with people. So yeah, I'm not going to sell as many books as Stephen King or whoever, but there's going to be a select few people who do connect with me, and they're going to connect with me through this kind of stuff, and then they're going to try out my books, and then they'll go, oh, that was better than I thought it would be.
yeah. Plus, you should just tell her because I'm good at it, and then go like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. You see this jacket? Um, no, but it is one of those things where, like, you do, as an indie creator, have to ask yourself, it's like, okay, why am I doing this? And ultimately, I think it has to be because, first of all, you just have to, like, just it's kind of in you. But the other thing is that you won't find a large audience, but you might find your audience. And that's really exciting when you find that person who's like, Lars Lazarus, yes, that was what I was waiting for. So I
Well,
don't know. Like, well, how for you? Like, I mean, this is a big question, but why do you do what you do?
because the world doesn't need another serial killer.
Yeah, there we go.
And if I didn't do this, I'd be a very unhappy person. So
Yeah,
that's really the truth, is because if I don't do it,
yeah.
I'm not happy. So
You'd
that's a
have too much time on your hands.
I don't know what I would do if I didn't do this. Maybe I'd be a productive citizen. I don't know. But that's the truth, though. It's because, to get really base, that what I've always said for years is when you can't create, you feel constipated, spiritually constipated.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and it is funny that fanboy radio group. So many of us, even way back when, we all had kind of things that we wanted to work on and things we wanted to do. And yeah, I mean, it's funny because you look back and we're all still doing it. It's just in different formats and different media and just, yeah, because it's just kind of in you at that point.
yeah, yeah. It's like I'm proud of us all.
Yeah, yeah, we did well for ourselves.
None of us are in prison.
Yeah, that is true. Um, Yet, so yeah, but
We know of.
well, Jim, you and I could probably keep talking, but I think I'm gonna have to let you go, and we'll need to do this again sometime.
Yeah, we should record it next time.
Oh, it is recorded.
Oh my God.
Yep, and yeah, and I don't edit. I already told you that, so that's
I,
the.
I should edit, but I don't.
Look at those men awkwardly stumbling through social issues.
Yes. So welcome back to Hate Talk.
Yeah, this is your host, White Savior, and
I'm, I'm the Brown Avenger, and we'll see you guys next time.
yeah. And yeah, and we'll yeah, actually, hate talk would be funny. Like, people call in and ask if they can say something. I have a black coworker. You can't say no, no, don't. Whatever you're about to say, you can't say that.
it's a hate talk, but we talk about grocery savings.
Yeah,
That's like, it's just called hate talk.
yeah, yeah. No, when I say Jew, it sounds offensive, but when he says Jew, it doesn't sound offensive. What's the difference? Well, let's talk about that for a second.
Well, let's start with the swastika on your arm, and let's work our way from there.
It it sends a message visually. Oh, okay. But I'm Hindu. Ooh, now it's complicated. Darn it. Like, so that's the Hindu sign? No, no, this is a swastika. Okay. Well,
That the other one's at home.
yeah. I actually, this is random, and as I said, we already are going over, but I actually have, when I was trying to get some of my shitty tattoos removed, they're not swastikas. They're like literally like bad tattoos that were done, like $20 tattoos
Was it a
that,
tramp stamp, David?
yes, it was a little floral arrangement along the lower back. But no, it was like a little cartoon figure back when I thought that ska would always be popular. And it was
Oh.
like one of those little cartoon like ska dancing guys. And anyway, I'm trying to get it removed. And I was talking to the girl that did the tattoo removal, 'cause we had some mutual friends and we were talking. And she did say that in the past few years since Black Lives Matters and all that stuff's come out, like she has had like this spike in people removing their racist tattoos.
Wow.
And I was
Wow.
like, that's really, and she says, you know what? I've been working here for years and years and years. And she says, and now like 9 times out of 10, it's someone showing up trying to get their whatever thing removed. And I was like, wow, we're doing better as a society. Like
Yeah.
that
Or
might be a good sign.
or are we just going undercover?
Yeah. I want to say that we're doing better. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope but that was like my moment of encouragement. And then I went home and turned on the news and I was like, oh wait, never mind.
Back to square one.
We're back. So no, we'll continue hate talk next time.
All right. It's a deal.
All right. Well, Jim, it was good talking to you, and yeah, I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you. Also, if people want to connect with you, they need to go visit your Patreon because you just started it, didn't you?
I've had it a while, but it's still,
I've had it for 10 years. I'm
I've
like,
actually gone monthly. That's the difference. A
okay,
couple months ago I went monthly, which I
okay.
should have done from the beginning. I've had it per project before, but since
Oh, okay.
new Patreon, it's a new day.
Oh, there you go.
So
It
yeah,
is,
check out Patreon, my Patreon when you get a chance.
and I've got it here, but it's like
That's my name. If you go to my name, it's there. It's
slash Jim Lujan.
Patreon/Jim Lujan.
Very nice. And I'll include a link on wherever I post this, and
Thank
so
you,
people
David.
can check that out because they need more Jim in their life. That's
You definitely do. You can't go to the gym, but Jim can come to you.
exactly. Oh, well done. I'm gonna end on that one. Just gonna be like, man, that was so cheesy. All right. Well, you take care.
You too, David.
All right. Talk to you later.
Thank you.